this is not going to be a class on how to turn a pen. Everybody in here presumably is at least familiar with a lathe. The pen's very easy to turn. The main thing I want to get across with this is, number one, the basics of what you need to start, what you'll like to have if you end up turning a lot of pens, and alternative ideas that don't necessarily fit in with what they show you in the instructions when you're making pens. I have friends I've got a friend in Seattle I was talking about earlier that he's probably turned 200 pens that look like they came from Walmart in a pick package. There's nothing wrong with that at all. He loves doing it. I have no problem with it, but they don't look like hand-turned pens. He mounts it in a pen press, turns it straight to the bearings. They're all white, and then he passes them out. I can't tell whether it came from Walmart or his shop. Slimline kit is the most common one to turn. My favorite is the Executive, and I'll show you why. I'll also show you some really cool things you can do with the Slimline kit that are not in the instructions. So there's a lot of different things you can do. The main thing I want to tell you to start is I'm going to be playing a video and kind of pause it and unpause it as we go. Let me share my video. I can find the sharing. I'm sorry? It's somewhere at the bottom. There it is. Share. I'm going to share this.
Share your audio with.
Well, I don't want the video audio to come out. I'm going to pause it whenever I speak, so I think it'll be okay. I'm going to mute the video audio. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the very basics you need if you want to turn pens. If you're going to turn a lot of pens, you're going to want more than this. If you're going to turn 1 pen a year, don't go out and buy a whole bunch of crap. If you go to Penn State, they're going to say you need thousands of dollars for this stuff. You don't. If you know how to turn, you can turn a pen with almost nothing. Also, if you've never turned before, it's the cheapest thing to start in because you can buy a lathe and the basic necessities to turn the first pen for very, very little. So obviously you need a lathe, and we're going to go along. You need some sort of glue. I use thick CA. Epoxy is better, but takes longer. You need some sort of mandrel. You can turn your own. You need a drill bit.
Showing your video.
That's really weird. I shared it. Okay, let's try that again. No, it's, oh, I clicked on it and didn't hit share. There we go. Let's hit share. Okay, now you should see it. Okay, let's try that again. Second time around. So yeah, obviously you need a lathe, something to drill with. You can use a hand drill. A drill chuck in the lathe is the most accurate. A drill press is the fastest. But in terms of the basics, so you've got a lathe, you've got some sort of glue, some sort of pen chuck, but you can make your own. You don't have to buy one if you're only going to turn a few. A holder for wood, one tool, some stick, and a pen kit. And that's it. So that's one of the cheapest holders you can buy. Oh, I do have a handout I need to give to somebody.
Randy.
Okay, I'll send it to you. It'll have the links to everything I'm doing. I didn't want to pass that as a handout because you'd have to type about 1,000 characters. This way you can just click on. So yeah, you just grab your chunk of wood, and I'll show you. I'll actually turn a pen with these basics here in a minute in the video. But that's because this is still spotlighted. I'm not sure how to go back and forth.
Did you get that check from?
PSI, and it'll be on the list of things that I bought. And I think these are $25. Yeah, I've got to sign of go back and forth in the sharing. So yeah, this is the pin chuck that you'll see. I'll be turning with it, but you grab a chunk of wood. I don't care if it's out of round. Just grab it tightly, and you can start with that. As I said, epoxy is probably the best. Thicker is better, but I'm lazy and thick CA is faster. And if you do it right, it works 99% of the time. You need some sort of pen hardware. You actually don't need much. One of the pens I'm going to show you literally only uses 2 pieces of hardware from the whole kit. The rest of it you can throw away. But some sort of pen hardware. There are people who make everything from scratch. They make the nib from scratch. They make those people have more time on their hands than I do. I used just a Jacobs chuck. I'm sorry?
Along with that pen kit, you also need the associated bushing.
Well, that's what you don't if you have the one everybody uses, the slimline kit. All mandrels come with the bushings for a slimline kit. Or if you make a mandrel, and I was going to, but I decided that making a mandrel I was only going to use once when I already have mandrels was a waste of time. But everybody knows how to turn something round. So if you take a fairly hard wood and turn 2 pieces and then turn them down just big enough to fit inside the pen, you've made a mandrel. And you don't need bushings as long as you have something accurate to measure with. You can take a piece of plywood and cut a notch out the exact size of your pen tip. You don't need bushings. Bushings make it easier. And on a slimline, like I said, everything comes with the bushings. The bushings cost nothing. But I'll go into bushings a little more. And then you need some sort of tool. The pen I'm going to show you I make in a minute, I made with this tool. You can do everything with this tool. Or if you're a beginner, carbide tool is easier. I don't find them quite as fun, and I can't get quite as good a finish, but you also don't have to buy all the sharpening stuff and all the stuff that goes with owning a SKU. Learning curve's a little better. And actually, you need something to coat it with. You can coat it with CA. My favorite, because I don't like shinier finishes. If you like a shiny finish, CA is good. If you have a really punky wood, CA is almost going to be a necessity because it'll get damaged by a thumbnail if you drop it in anything, and it's very hard to finish without CA. So with punky wood, I was telling a couple of people, I did this in CA. I used two 2-ounce bottles of CA on this. If you feel how heavy this is, 95% of this is CA and 5% of it's wood. I soaked it, planed it down, soaked it, planed it down, did that till it was smooth. And so some woods are a real pain, but I really like wax. Hard wax is really easy. Turn the lathe on slow, wipe it on, turn it on fast, and wipe it off with a paper towel, and you're done. It's 10 seconds. You can put 2 coats on if you feel like it, and it'll take 20 seconds. But it's extremely durable, but I wouldn't use it on a pen somebody's going to use nonstop every day. It will eventually wear. I don't mind the look of when somebody's fingers eventually leave, oils and stuff in the wood, but if you want a pen to look pretty forever, it should be a harder finish. I mean, there's 1,000 finishes out there. You can use polyurethane, you can use CA, makes a very hard finish, put 6 or 7 coats of CA on, and it's going to be real tough to damage it. And I do use CA sometimes, but I love the really natural look of the wax, personally. It'll look a little disappointing because the wax will look shinier when you first put it on, and then 10 minutes later, it'll turn matte, and you'll be like, oh, that's not what it looked like on the lathe. But if you're expecting it, it's fine. So that's everything you need. Now, if you get more advanced into it, I'm going to show you a lot more stuff that you could use. So if you're doing a lot of pens, like my wife, when we got married, she turned a pen for every person in the wedding. Not in the wedding party, every person who came to the wedding. Now, it wasn't big because it was during COVID, but she turned over 30 pens. I'll show you a picture of that at the end. I didn't have all of them, but I had most of them. And she set up an assembly line. And to do that, you really need a drill press and a bandsaw or some sort of way of quick cutting things square. I actually have a sled that I made for the bandsaw, so I can cut things very square on it.
Here, I don't know. I think it got lost. You used to have a sled for the bandsaw back there that you put your tube in and it cut it 1/16 inch longer than the tube.
Right. Well,
I
do a bunch of different sizes, so I don't have it set for one size. But when she did, I don't remember if you.
Adjustment.
Yeah.
Tube in, they cut it to 16.
Yeah, I made mine from scratch and I didn't make it that
We
advanced.
did too.
But, and if I was only turning pens, actually I would do that, but I use my sled for other things as well.
And I have not found it back there, what I'm saying.
Gotcha. All right, so before I do the video of me turning this pen with almost nothing, I'm going to show you the setup that you probably want if you were going to turn a ridiculous number of pens. I had most of the setup already because obviously you can use bandsaws and drill presses for lots of other things. So I did not buy all this to turn pens with. Just gonna. So bigger lathe, bigger chucks, lots of sandpaper. And by the way, on this pen, I'm going to show you, I did not use sandpaper on it. So you don't have to have sandpaper. Lots of different types of CA glue, including black, lots of different finishes, a squaring device, micro mesh pads, lots more finishes, extra glue, walnut oil, a whole bunch of bushings. And this is only one drawer of, there's 2.5 drawers, I think, of bushings. I'll get into bushings in a minute. A pen thing to take pens apart with. This is my small lathe with the basic stuff on it. A pen press. You can press stuff with the lathe, works great, takes longer. The pen press, especially mounted to the wall, is really nice. A thing full of pen kits, a bandsaw, a trimmer to square the ends of your, and lots of different sizes. Drill press, drill bits. I also have a lot more drill bits than that, but they wouldn't fit on the drill press. A holder for the blanks and the drill press. And a pressure pot for doing epoxy, probably bigger than you need for a pen. Every pen turner has to have hundreds of pen blanks, so we have hundreds of pen blanks. And a vacuum chamber, which you can use in lieu of a pressure pot or in concert with it. I have had a request to move over. Before I get into turning the pen, I'm sorry. I'm just going to show you a couple of extra things I brought in. One of the things I found invaluable, I usually use an air compressor, but to blow off the shavings on the lathe, I'm anal. I will not move the banjo if there's any dust in the lathe. I don't like grinding it into the banjo. I don't like cleaning the banjo. I like having it all clean. So this has the same power as a full blower you'd use like to blow your leaves off. And these are like $30. And there is a link to it on the links I'm going to show you. But Bill just pick this up and go root and take all the dust off the lathe and throw it everywhere else in the shop is perfect. I already showed you the tool, but this with the rounded tip, you can do almost anything with. It's hard to get stuff really straight. Like it wants to leave gouges because it's round, but you can turn it in an angle. You can do lots of different cuts with it. It takes forever to dull it. And if you're only going to have one tool, I would probably recommend that one. I didn't bring in the sandpaper, but I showed you in the video. I have lots of rolls of 1-inch sandpaper. I really like, yes. Mine's a metal thing that mounts to the wall, but it's the exact same thing as this. So it's just all the grits of sandpaper. So if you really want to get into sanding, I'm going to even show it on the camera over here. You can get a box with lots of different granite, and this actually has a cutter on the edge. So it works really well. I bought this and a metal one, so you mounted it to the wall. Again, because I'm lazy. If you really want to do hardwoods, and this doesn't have any effect on softwoods, but if you want to do hardwoods, make them really polished, make the chatoyance really stand out, you want to go to finer and finer grits. Micro mesh is the perfect thing for that. And these are all reusable a lot. It takes a lot to wear these out. It's just a pad. And these go from, they start at 1500 grit and end at 12,000 grit. These are really handy if you're turning various types of plastics, epoxy or acrylic. What I like even better, and everybody who knows me will know this, is Yorkshire grit or axe sanding paste. Does the same thing as this, but in one step. You put the paste on, buff it off, and you immediately go from 600 grit to 1200 grit. Then you go to the next level of it and it immediately goes to, I think, 6,000 grit, and it takes seconds. And you'll see me do that on here. But these are really handy. As Russ said, one of the main reasons Penn State likes to sell you pen kits, they don't care whether you buy the kits. They want you to buy bushings and drill bits. And they will use the most bizarre sized tubes, bushing, and drill bits you've seen. And they do the same thing with their salt and pepper grinders. They're like, we need you to buy a 758, 756 bit to drill this with. They're just selling you drill bits. But if you're going to turn a lot of a pen, definitely buy a bushing. If you're going to turn a pen you've never turned before, like let's say you've got a friend who's big into cats, they make a cat pen. The clip is the cat's tail coming down. It's very cute. Got to buy the bushings for it. These are like $3.50. You can do it with a caliper, and if you're only going to turn one, it might be worth it. But for me, and what I have found is when you first get into it, you buy a bunch of bushings, and then you find there's a couple kits you really like, and you never use any of the bushings again. So I have a lot of bushings I'll probably never use. Something that you couldn't see in the picture, these are nylon bushings. After you've turned a pen and after you've completely finished it, but have not put not put CA on it. If you want to finish with CA, or if you need to fix something in CA, you put this in place instead of the bushings, and the CA will not glue the pen to the bushings. If it does, there are ways to get it off, but it's a lot more pleasant to use these. They can, it's often a pain in the ass. Yeah. You can, one of the ways you can actually slide if you slide the pen and the bushing all the way to the end here, sometimes you can rock it back and forth and break the CA. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you might end up drilling it out and throwing away the bushings. But yes.
So this happens to me while I'm putting the tube into the hole that you drill, right? You put some CA glue on it and you put it in. I always get glue on my hands, and then I'm peeling CA glue off my hands for like 3 hours.
Yeah. I'll show you because I actually cover that in the video, but yeah, medical gloves are really cheap. You can buy a big box of them, and yeah, exactly. You can turn it right off the wood. Turning it off your fingers hurts.
I bought box gloves from Public Freight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A cheater. Q-tip. Break it, not break it, bend it in half, stick it inside of the brass. Your finger never touches the tube, never touches the glue, never. You put it in, let it set for a second, pull the Q-tip out, you're done.
And then there's another cheating way. It does require cleaning the tool, but it does not require cleaning your hands, and the tool's easier. I kind of glossed by it, but on my wall, I've got a pen press mounted to the wall, and you'll see me use it later. Just to the right of it, you'll see it's just a handle and a very light tapered piece of metal. You cram that into the pen tube and use it to set the pen tube. And when it dries, just pull it out and clean the end off. You never get it on your fingers. So that's another way. I like when I have leftover epoxy, which I do if I'm putting epoxy things. A lot of time before I do it, because there are 3 options with epoxy. You make too little, which is probably 50% of the time. You make too much, which is better than making too little. And about 1/1,000,000th of a percentage of the time, you make exactly the right amount. So I usually am planning on making too much. So I usually have a couple molds with just random stuff in them, and I can fill them up. This one, there's nothing inside of here. I just had the leftover epoxy and dumped it into a mold. I keep forgetting to show them the camera, which my wife is kindly pointing out. But yeah, this was one of the things on the last class I did on filling voids. The leftover epoxy, just dropped it in the mold. I even drilled a hole slightly smaller than 7 millimeters in the mold, so I could stick a pen tube all the way through and make it with the pen tube in it if I'm happen to be turning a slim line. It's cheating, but it's works. And then this one, I had everybody here familiar with Banksia seeds, Banksia pods? A couple of yeses. So a Banksia pod, yeah, a Banksia pod it's a seed pod, and it's about the size of a pine cone. They vary in size. And all of the seeds are on the outside. When the seeds come out, it leaves all of these slotted holes. And so when you fill one with epoxy, they turn really cool. Well, what I did is I just cut one in quarters and dropped them in here and made several. You'll see you will see a pen that I'll pass around here in a bit made out of a Banksia pod. I'm also going to give this away if somebody is interested in turning it.
Great. Thanks, you, pot.
They
If
do.
you've never turned one, you're in for a trip.
If you don't fill them with epoxy, they're a nightmare to turn.
Can you show it?
Yeah, I tried when I held it up, but you can see kind of. So I'll pass this around. If you hold it up to the light, you'll be able to see. So two corners of it are obviously where I cut them, and then one's the edge. So the really cool thing you can do with these, if you have an enormous amount of time and you wear a face visor, is you fill each of the holes with copper and CA. You can just pass it down. I've seen somebody turn a Banksia pod that way. It looked unbelievable. But if the CA breaks pieces of copper, you have to wear face masks because you can seriously damage your face with it. There are a variety of pen mandrels out there. The most common one is the one I least like. And if you've used one, you'll know why. The most common one has this rod and it's threaded on the end, and you put your blanks on it and spin a handle until it's tight. There's a little divot in the end, and you put your live center in the divot. So again, like the epoxy, there's three ways to do it. One is too loose, where the end flops around, you end up with a bad pen. One is just right, and as soon as you get it just right, this end will seat better, and it won't be just right anymore. And the third way, which is the normal, is to do it too tight, and it bows it, and you end up with a pen that's off center and doesn't work very well. This type is called a mandrel saver. So this just slides in here and it grabs your pen blank. I like this for pens that have more than one piece. However, my favorite kind, and you can do this again, if you're only going to have one and you're not going to turn a lot of pens, you can turn a two-piece pen with this by just turning them one at a time. This one just mounts like this and grabs the blank. Now the blank can be infinitely long, infinitely short, and it can't ever be off center. I mean, I really, really like this. And the executive pen kit, which is my favorite, I turn with this, and they always come out perfect. And you only have to put one bushing on each side. These are really nice. All right, so I'm going to show a quick demonstration on turning a pen with the absolute bare necessity, no sandpaper, nothing except for the couple things I showed you right at the beginning here. I don't know, does everybody want to see this? If so, I'll pass it around. I'm pen mandrel.
I have that pen.
This is also called a pen mandrel.
Specifics to it, like
There's about 4 different kinds of pen mandrels. This is I would call it a single blank pen mandrel, but I don't know that it's got a different name. There's like 3 or 4 different types of pen mandrels. And this is one of them. I'll pass it around. We'll just do that. Oh, and by the way, when you buy this, it comes with a bunch of bushings for slimline pens and a 7mm drill bit for slimline pens. So if you're going to make slimline pens, this covers most of what you need right off the bat.
Yeah, they call the bushings the spacers. Because in the original, if you use the wheel that you screw on the end, you may need spacers. Get rid of that as much as possible.
Yeah.
But the other thing is they are the same bushings for the slimline pen.
Yeah, they went ahead and made all the spacers exactly the size of a slimline pen. So I don't know if everybody at home can hear them, but it's real easy. And if you destroy them, it doesn't matter because it comes with like 6 of them. And if you have to buy a bag of them, they cost nothing. They're just a bunch of little tubes. So if you're going to be turning any pen other than a slimline, then you've got to get a special set of bushings. And this determines the diameter that you turn the pen to. So you turn the end of the pen all the way down until it touches this bushing. And when you do, it's now the size it needs to be. All right, so now we're going to turn a pen with almost nothing. Okay, you can see I drill. And this drill wobbled a little bit. which I did on purpose. Unfortunately, I skipped all past that. I'll show you in a bit how I fixed that, but this is meant to be the most basic thing you need. So I've got literally a stick. This part's really important if you've ever turned pins. So I've got two pin kits up here. This is a slimline kit. They normally, because of the cheapest kits, come with really nice, shiny, smooth barrels. Really nice, shiny things don't stick very well. And so you've got to sand them so that the epoxy or the CA glue has something to dig into and grab. So kind of some bite. So always make sure that it looks really rough before you glue it. If it looks really smooth, there's a good chance it's going to break free on the lathe, or it's going to break free on the drill press, or it's going to break free somewhere.
Just FYI, that single pin or single blank mandrel system is called the turn between centers mandrel system.
And it will be on the links that I'm send to. Everything you see me use up here is on that sheet of links. And obviously, if I miss something, you can always email me about it as well. But my sheet of links has that because I love using that. All right, so then I just, on here, because I'm doing this all on the lathe, I'm gluing it on the lathe so that I can square the end without having to take it off and put it back on and worrying about getting it in the same place. And I just used a Q-tip to clean it out. I used gloves, if you saw. And then I need to turn it round enough that I can turn it back around and mount it and still have it still aligned. So right now I'm just preparing it to remount it the opposite direction so I can square the other end. It's very important that it's square. If it's not, when you put a tip in, it's going to fit like this and you're going to be unhappy with it. And I purposely screwed up a bunch of pins to show you those things too.
How long have you kept them around?
Oh no, I made these this week. Yeah. So on here, I just stuck another tube in the end and didn't glue it just to hold it in place while I got it close. And then I marked about where the end of the tube was, planed off the wood. I was hoping to make both ends of the pin out of it, but the rest of the wood was just too punky. So I'm just going to turn the rest of it off here. I don't actually work this fast. This is sped up just a little bit. And then I'm squaring it using the one tool I'm using through the whole process. You want to get as square as possible. You can hold a ruler across the end. On a slim line, the part that needs to be square is so tiny. Honestly, if you get it close to the tube, it's going to be square enough. That's here. I want to show you something real quick. If you look, when I spin it around and remount it, I'm sorry, this blank is almost done. So I'm going to mount the other piece of the pin. So I end up using two different pieces of wood. I use the tool to make a little divot in the end. That will keep the drill bit from wandering around. And then, yeah, glued this one together. Same thing, using gloves. Used a Q-tip to clean it out. Also, sometimes I'll just put my pocket knife in and ream the end out a little bit if there's a little bit of glue in there. Sometimes when you square it, oh, that was important. Once you get the end fairly square, I highly recommend soaking both ends in thin CA. You'll see me do that here. That makes the ends stiffer, makes them less likely to chip out. And I also had a small crack in it, so I just filled that with thin CA, let it soak in. And then I'm just turning the other half of the pin. And I held it and squared it the same way I did the first one. I'm sorry?
I think it's a good idea, putting a CA glue in the end. To keep the chip off.
Every time before you turn it, just soak the end in thin CA. Spray it with accelerator. It doesn't have to be in long, but the ends, especially if it's in grain like this, it's going to want to chunk out at the end. And chunking out at the end is the worst.
Done that, chipped off the last,
Yep.
1/8 of an inch or 6/8
Now,
of an inch.
you can see here, I actually did chip a little of the end of this one off, but it was a pretty bizarre piece of wood. So I used black CA to fill it. Actually, I used the thick CA because I was using everything in one, but I did use a little black CA right at the end. Just filled the chunk. And then I use copper a lot too, obviously. And then I just used the wax right there. And that little piece of wax my dad gave me a very long time ago, and I'm finally down to almost needing a new one. They last forever. When you put the pen together, well, I'll do it and then I'll talk about it. I'm going to use the lathe to press it together. A lathe actually works better than any pen press. It's just slower. So I press the tip in, press the cartridge in. Press the other end and the clip in. And the pin's done. Ta-da. Yep. Okay, so as you see in that, I didn't use any sandpaper. I did not use sandpaper off the screen. I turned the whole pen exactly like you saw, with all of the tools I showed you at the beginning, almost nothing. I'm going to pass that pen around. Excuse the fact that the top and bottom are two different pieces of wood, but again, it was just meant to quickly do it. If you look at the bottom of the bottom piece, you'll see where I filled it with a little black CA to catch the chip at the end. Couple important things that really easy to miss when you first do this. The only important thing, and I'm going to bring this up a number of times later, the only important thing when you're turning a slimline pen is the bottom tube has to be a very specific length. You can fix it a little. If you turn it like a millimeter or two down, you can press the mechanics in less. So I always recommend, and you'll see I did it here, you're supposed to press the mechanics in. I don't know if this will even show up, but there's a line on there. So there's a copper part and then a line. You're supposed to press it to the line, never press it to the line to begin with. When you were squaring it, you could have shortened the blank. I usually press it to just the end of the copper and then put a pin in and see. It should retract all the way and just be barely below the tip. When you first start turning, you may have it come out just a little bit, and then you'll find it's a pain to write with. So you want it to come out quite a ways when you turn it. And so you can always push it in farther. It's really, really hard to get that mechanics back out if you've pushed it in too far. I make a one-piece pen later. You'll see me press it all the way into the line. It's because on a one-piece pen, I know I didn't modify that tube, but I know it's the right length. There is one company, I do not know which one. They don't make the bottom and top tube the same size. I was not aware of this, and the first pen I did, I had a 50-50 chance of ruining it, and I ruined it. The bottom part was short, the top part was long. I have no idea why they do that and nobody else does. You can fix that. If you really have a lot invested in the pen, you can cut the pen tube, take the plastic end off, glue it to the end, have a short pen that won't last as long. It's not the best, but you can salvage a pen, especially if somebody's not going to write a lot with it. You can actually have a pen that still works. The next thing I'm going to go over real quick, and at the end, I'm going to kind of do a wrap up where I'm going to show a bunch of different types of pens and some ideas. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you how I did the epoxy and the mold and the Banksia pods and a couple of the pens here. I'll have a really nice looking scrap piece of wood, the end of a burl, the cutoff of something. Just throw it in the thing. Next time you have epoxy, pour it in there with it, and you could have a really nice blank. And this is just going to be real quick. This is going to be the 1 in a million times. I literally mixed exactly to the drop the correct amount of epoxy. That may be the only time this happened in my life. But the fact that I did it for the demo, I'm going to say it was on purpose. So there it is. It literally just perfect. I didn't. I promise. It was exact. Shh. Also keep in mind, you want it as full as possible. The reason you're filling it with epoxy is because whatever you're filling is not a solid piece. Epoxy is going to soak into it. It's going to drop into voids that have bubbles come out. And in the end, you're going to have a lower level of epoxy than you started with. On a pen blank, it's fine. You're still drilling the center. You've got room to play, but you don't want to lose half of it. You don't want to start with it too low. If you fill it just the amount you think you need, when you bring it back out, it'll be lower than you needed. So keep in mind the more Banksia pods are full of holes. So it's going to soak in a lot of epoxy. I dropped that in the pressure pot, left it in there a couple days because it was a slow epoxy. And what came out was the blank that you guys were passing around that you really only need about 50 PSI, but I feel better when it's at 90, even though there's no reason for it at all.
Big tank, the one you have.
Tank is 80. That tank is the one I have, they
Yeah.
got a pop-off valve at 80.
Yeah. No, my pop-off valve is higher than that, but I don't normally do it to 90. It depends too on how many holes and stuff are in it.
You take that epoxy to dry.
It depends. There's about 1 million kinds of epoxy. This one is a deep pour epoxy, which I probably didn't need for pen blanks, but it's what I happen to have. Deep pour epoxy. Epoxy's exothermic. Stan knows way more about it than I do, but it gets hot. And if you pour a thick pour, it gets hot, it bubbles and it ruins it. So it doesn't get as hot. It cures way slower. It can take 2 to 3 days. And if you turn it early, you will really regret it. It'll be beautiful and soft to turn and it'll look terrible. It'll be like sanding silly putty. It's terrible. Don't ask me how I know that. So yeah, the one I passed around was literally the one I poured there in that shot. And then just turn it like a normal, drill it and turn it. Like I said, sometimes I'll do it with the thing right in it.
Try to put together a discussion, because I'm trying to get into epoxy, and I'll try to put a little discussion together or something on the different types of epoxy.
And yeah, I have one called diamond resin, and they are not kidding. You cannot see it. You're sitting there holding the piece, and it looks like you're holding something invisible. It's crystal clear. It's not cheap, but I'm not using it for large projects. Yeah. But I've done some diamond. In fact, I'm going to pass one around that I did with diamond epoxy. This was my first attempt at doing this, so ignore the basics. But I wrapped a pen tube in cigar tobacco, glued a cigar label on it, cast it in diamond epoxy. Except for the fact it's glossy, you can't tell that there's epoxy on it. I've turned several cigar pens since. That was my experiment. All the ones I've turned since have turned out nicer than that one. But
one thing I've learned is everybody says epoxy. Technically, epoxy is one type of resin.
correct.
You got urethane resins, epoxy resins,
Polyester.
fiberglass resin.
Polyester resin.
Poly-
All of them can be used in fiberglass, but
Yeah.
polyester resin.
And typically, the epoxies are the deep pour. The urethanes tend to be shallow pours because they're faster cures. So there's what do you want?
And you can buy 5-minute epoxy, and it hardens in about 20 minutes. Not usually 5, but your working time's real short on it.
Time.
Something really dumb on epoxy is that part A and part B. Part A is base, part B is activator.
Yeah.
So they're named exactly the opposite of what they should be. And be really careful with epoxies. It's pretty critical that you mix them in the right amounts. Weight's the best, but a lot of epoxies I have don't list the weights of them. But some of them are 3-to-1, some of them are 2-to-1, some of them are 1-to-1, 5-to-1. Yeah, there's a lot of, if you mix it wrong, it'll never cure.
When I took that deep pour, when I took the charcuterie event thing, when we were making boards, their epoxy open time was 4 hours. They had to let it set for 4 hours before it could move, or they could literally move the thing. Otherwise, it would
I have some
not firm.
tabletop epoxy that's that way. But it also, again, it's exothermic, is very highly dependent on temperature. So I can take the tabletop epoxy in my shop and it'll take 4 hours before you can touch it, or I can set it in the sun and in a half hour, you can touch it. The hotter you get it, CA is the same way. The hotter it gets, the faster it goes off. If you happen to mix CA with anything cotton, it'll go off instantly.
Fun.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So you get it on your t-shirt, you'll immediately feel a burn mark on your skin and it will be attached to you and burning. If you put it on cotton cloth, it will start smoking. It hardens very, very fast. You have to be very careful. If your paper towels have a high cotton content, you have to be very, very careful with CA. It goes off instantly when it hits cotton.
And it glues too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, it burns your skin. It'll melt right through gloves into your finger. Be very careful with it. I wanted to say something about the pressure pot and the vacuum chamber. It makes me feel better to do both. It is probably not necessary. A vacuum chamber pulls out air and replaces it with epoxy. If you're only going to have one or the other, you probably are better off with a pressure pot. A vacuum chamber can only pull, is it 14 PSI? A pressure pot can do 90 PSI. Well, 80 PSI, depends on your pressure pot, but let's say 50 PSI to be safe. That's 4 times what a vacuum chamber can pull. A vacuum chamber takes the bubbles and the air out only if they have a place to go out. If it's a cup and the bubble's facing up, it's not going to take it out. A pressure pot makes the bubbles microscopic. So it takes a bubble this big and makes it down so small you can't see it. So even if it's hidden inside of a cavity, it'll still squash that bubble down to nothing. So then when you carve down to that cavity, you don't suddenly have a cavity. If you do both, it's really good. And the vacuum chamber is really good if you have a bunch of punky wood that you want to stabilize. So that's the type of epoxy I use too. Stabilization epoxy, you have an unlimited working time, more or less. It's activated by heat. So you can leave it sitting overnight in a vacuum chamber in a not very hot room. And as soon as you put it in the oven, it cures. I've used a couple different ones. Cactus juice, the one I have at the moment. And you can, if you refrigerate it, they say the shelf life is not that long. I've used it after 2 years and it still works great if it's in the refrigerator. I've also had somebody drink it thinking it was tea, even though I had very specifically written on the bottle, this is not to drink, but yeah, we had a friend that wasn't real sharp. But she realized real quick it wasn't tea. Yeah. Realized real quick it wasn't tea, but it was, I'm sure it was nasty. So there is a major thing to look out for whether you're using a pressure pot or a vacuum chamber. One of the types of molds I have is made for bigger pens with the tube already in them. So what it has holes in the ends, and you stick 2 silicone plugs in the end and then fill it with epoxy. If you put that in a vacuum chamber, it's going to pop both of those out and fill the ends of the tubes with epoxy. If you put in a pressure pot, it's going to squeeze them in so hard, they're going to be harder to get out. They're silicone, so they're not too bad. I did a pen with her where I wanted two blanks end to end, and they had 2 different size bushings. So I actually turned a little piece of wood to fit inside of hers, turned the other end to fit inside of mine, and drilled a hole through it to equalize the pressure, and then put a plug in each end with a hole in them. And that way the pressure was equalized all the way through. You could collapse a tube in a vacuum. You can, if the tube fills up with epoxy, you're going to throw the pen out. I mean, you can re-drill it, but I've very rarely been able to drill perfectly straight through a pen tube and not enlarge the pen tube. So think about what's happening whether you're putting pressure on it or vacuum if the pen tube is plugged in both ends. Even the one that has the plugs, you can drill holes through the plugs. As long as the plug is holding inside where the epoxy is going, it doesn't matter if there's a hole on the end of it. So you can drill holes in, but you need to equalize the pressure or not use a pressure pot. All right, let's see what the next part of the video is.
You can wrap up in about 12 minutes, 15 minutes.
Yeah, and I'm just going to pass a couple pens around. I'll let the rest of this video run so we can do that, and then I can do questions and pass a couple pens around at the end. This is really nice to start with. It's a really heavy drill bit, and it lets you start a hole and then drill with the regular bit. So I'm doing that. I'm squaring. I have a carbide squaring tool, which I've got right here. I like it a lot better than the non-carbide one because you don't sharpen it very much and you can turn the bits. So I'm a big fan of that. Here, same thing, just turning it round so I can grab it at the other end and then square it. If you square it from both ends this way, you don't have to worry about it being mounted crooked in the end because I'm making it round in the same direction it's been squared in. I do have use this to square it on my drill press if I'm doing a bunch of pens, but this is really the most accurate way to do it. So yeah, I just flipped it around, squaring the other end. And then I just pressed it together. This is the executive pin kit. So easy. If you don't have to see my face for this, but if you put together a slimline kit in the wrong order, you throw it away. If you put the mechanism in before you put the tip on, there's no way to put the tip on after that. So unless you have some way of taking that off without damaging the pen, I do have a thing to disassemble pens. Usually you have to grip a pen so hard to get it out, you're going to ruin the pen. If mechanism's what's important, then it's worth it. But I also have put a tube inside and just banged it down until I can get it out. But with the executives kit, you literally stick the ends on in any order you want and you're done. You're turning one single piece. You get a nice big piece of wood, which I like too, because you can display the wood better. You're not having to cut that in half. This is a one-piece pen. It's just a slimline pen, but I'm doing it all in one piece, so it's not split in the middle. And I'll pass that around here in a sec. So you do not have to do a slimline in two pieces. And when you do it in one piece, you can see how fast this is. I literally did this entire thing, including doing the ribs on it, in less than 5 minutes. And it showcases a nice big piece of wood. You don't have to cut it up. And it means your center doesn't have to be thin. So you get more leeway in the design when you do that. You don't have to bring the center down to a barrel size. I will show you that momentarily. And this is my pen press. So this is the mechanism. You put it in the tube. You do not glue the tube in the pen. So you put the tip on, you put the mechanism in, you leave the tube in while it's on the lathe to hold it, but you just take it right back out. You put the mechanism in, and I'll show you on this one that I've got here in a sec.
Scott, I have a comment.
Is somebody asking a question out in the?
Yeah, Scott, is Paul McDaniel.
Yeah.
When using those pen presses like that, the pen press I have has a little nib on the ends of it for alignment.
Right.
And if you don't screw the threads in on the mechanism, you end up destroying the mechanism. When you press it in, screw in a ink tube and check the length of it.
Right.
And if it's too short, you take it back out, you press a little more.
Right.
Sometimes you're pressing against the threads and you destroy that mechanism.
Right. Yeah. No, on this one, it just has neoprene bushing on the end that it presses against.
Okay,
I also
some of the presses do have a little alignment nib that goes inside.
Yeah, and you can ruin the threads if you do that.
And it will destroy them.
Yep. I'll also say I highly recommend this pen press. It is more expensive than the basic one everybody uses. The basic one's also made out of pot metal and breaks eventually if you use it a lot. This one's not only way sturdier, but instead of a bunch of blocks you have to keep track of to make the thicknesses different, which I had on mine, I'm constantly dropping them. This one, all of the blocks are built in. So you just throw them all open, set the pen in place, let it be held by the magnet or by the spring, flip open all of them closed, and the ones that close fully are holding it. And it's really fast and easy to use. And honestly, I think it's $30 more. It's not a big investment. And if you mount it to the wall, you got both hands to use. That I was just pointing out, when you're doing a two-piece pen, if the grain's important, if it's a very specific grain like this, I wanted the grain to line up. So when you're doing a pen, before you cut it, mark your cut line and make an arrow on each side. So when you mount it on the lathe, those two pieces are there. I make a strong point whenever I make a pen. There's no reason beyond this other than me doing it a standard way. I always put the tip on my right and the end on my left because I never screw it up if I do that. However you do it, don't get them reversed because if you stick the wrong end in, especially on more complicated kits. I love cigar pins. 4 different size bushings, 4 different size tips, 4 different everything. They are a pain in the butt to turn. If you make one mistake, you throw it away and start over again. So you have to be real careful with alignment. So this one, I'm just showing you using this actual mandrel. Nothing real magical about it, except if you look, I'm using 2 different lengths. Remember I said you don't have to use the same length for the top and bottom? On a slimline pen, everybody makes this part in the center. It doesn't have to be in the center. So the pen I'm doing right there is this one. Also doesn't have to have a clip. If you want to make the top bigger and if you got somebody who's not using a clip, skip the clip, throw it away. Don't have to use the center band. You want to make it wider in the center so it doesn't dip down. You want a thicker pen, skip the center band. Make your own.
Wow, it's crazy.
Yeah. So I'm gonna show these on the screen for everybody in a minute, but
Don't know if I still have it. I have a pen made out of 7.
I'm going to. That's why I have the messed up pen. So yeah, you can see I'm turning on this one. That's the other thing. The only thing that matters is the length of the bottom tube. You can make the top as long as you want. In fact, you can make it roughly this long. If you don't put a cap in the end, you can make it 10 feet long. Doesn't matter how long the top is. The bottom is the only thing that matters. Okay, what I'm doing here, this is kind of important. Right. So the mandrels are a little flimsy. So if you turn the fairly fast and just touch a pen to it, you'll see with a high where it's out of round, and you can just tap it back into place. I've not found one that's hard enough that I don't have to do this. So I check it almost every pen I turn. If it's out of balance, then I'm going to show you exactly what happens because I did one of the pens this way on purpose before I tuned it. With this pen that I did the top of one length and the bottom a different length, I just glued a piece of copper in to make it easy to twist. No other reason. And it has a nice, really thin copper line there. So that's this one where you can see the top is longer than the bottom. And 2 different colors. I did them in contrasting colors on purpose. And the video is almost done, so then I'll just go over a couple of the different types of things you can do with pens, and I'll take questions and we'll be done. I'm going to show you that. That's what I'm going to do here at the end. This is just me putting my battery on the camera went out about 60 seconds before I finished this, but I was just using the sanding paste that I was talking about. Okay, so again, the only thing that matters to making the pen work is that the bottom tube is the length that it is. Don't change that length. If you don't, you can change it by a little. Like I said, you can put the cartridge in less, but there is nothing that says the entire tube has to be in the bottom. So half this tube is I'm sticking into here. I don't know if you can see that. So half the copper tube is in the bottom. I could have made the bottom 1 millimeter and made the top the full length. I can make the bottom any length. As long as this tube isn't changed, then there is nothing that says the 2 have to be symmetrical. And I did put a little copper in there just for an accent between the 2 woods. This one?
Oh, so you only glued it into that small lower
Only
part.
glued it. You always only glue it into the lower part.
Yeah.
People just don't leave some sticking out. Correct. This one, I just used a longer pen tube for the top. The bottom pen tube is still the correct length. Does not matter. Right. I made this specifically, actually, I made this one to look like a ball bat. You do not have to use the ring they give you. If you don't, you get to make the middle any size you want. You can make the pen flow how you want. This one, I used a cutoff of that piece of epoxy. I had another one of these pen blanks. I had a little piece left off the end, so I just stuck it in the middle of the pen. Not a lot of light here, but that ring is just a piece of that epoxy. I'll pass these around. You're welcome to pull them apart and put them back together. One piece pen, same thing. The pen tube just has to be the correct length. You just can't glue it to this half. But the part that friction fits in when they're two pieces, still friction fits in if it's one piece. The pen does not know or care. The one thing you have to be careful about is this ends up being thin. If the wood's not fairly hard, fairly strong, or soaked with CA, this is going to be easy to break. But now I have a one-piece pen, shows off the beauty of the entire piece of wood.
Only the nib is the thing that turns.
Correct. You only turn the nib. Oh. I also have a really handy dandy tool that's cheating that made all of the ribs on this at the same time. In the video, you saw me use it briefly if you're really watching close. But then I just burned it with a wire. This is way smaller than the wires they sell at Penn State, so it was some piano wire or something I'd gotten somewhere. So I've got a couple really ultra thin ones to make ultra thin black lines. But it's really nice if you got a pen that's all white. It breaks it up and gives you a little bit of a grip at the end. So I'll pass that one around. Let me pull the pen part way out because it's a little hard to get out. Now you can pull it out. Just be a little careful because the end can break easily. And if it does, it's not that big of a deal. This is the Banksia. And another thing I want to point out, you do not have to use the cap they give you. There's nothing that says you can't make your own cap. This cap I made out of a piece of wood. I cut into the end a little bit and I had a titanium butterfly earring and I just set it in the end with black CA. And this is a Banksia. So I'll pass it around. You'll be able to see what a Banksia pod looks like when you turn it. That's a quarter of a Banksia pod. I did not turn the middle. Just like a pine cone, the middle of a Banksia pod doesn't look like anything.
Pods make interesting Christmas ornaments.
They do. And you can slice a cross section on them, turn it on the lathe round, and fill it with whatever you want. You can use any of the different fillers I showed in my last demo. Holding it to what? Have you turned one of these? A two-piece pen? What holds the tip on that two-piece pen?
It's all glued to the wind. I mean,
You don't glue it. You just force it in.
Pressed into-
It's just pressed into the end.
pressed.
you don't glue the bottom piece.
No, just like this. No. When you make one of these, you press this end in and then press this end in, you're done. You don't have to glue it. The only reason you have to glue it is if you some reason wallowed out the tube.
So you only glue the top of it?
Don't glue any of it. Oh, on that, I didn't glue the tube to the pen at all. The top part I did, but not the bottom half.
I'm totally lost.
Here, let me see this. I'm gonna go ahead and leave it partway pulled out so the next person can get it easily. So just like if there was wood here, I press the tip in here, press this end in here. I leave this in here when I'm turning it because I've got to have something to hold it on the lathe. But I do not glue this piece to the wood. And when you put it in, this sticks in with friction to the top tube, just like it would if it was a two-piece pen.
Wood, spinning.
So when you put this tube in and the other tubes in, and you put the bearings or the bushings against it, you're pushing in on the tubes just like the bushings would. I mean, you can put in 5 bushings and they'll still work. Yeah. Yep.
Basically, you're assembling the lower half of the pen without any wood around.
That's exactly what I did. It was in the video. Yeah. Just a caveat. If you do one of these, sometimes some pen kits are bad about the tip swelling this end a little bit. If it's in wood, it'll crack the wood. If it's not in wood, you might find it too hard to get in and turn. If that's the case, you can always sand the inside out a little bit. I even have a 7.1 millimeter drill bit that can drill it out because it doesn't matter if it's slightly too big. If this is in there, it's going to be held in place. But so don't push this all the way back in. Just leave it out for the next person. But
Is this possible? Or would you make a normal pen and then make a big and then have another
and the other way,
no, another tube right here and then just keep going, connect it to the next line.
you can, but you don't actually need it. You can either use a really long tube or
What is spinning?
one of the ones that's going around, there is no cap on the end. I didn't drill it all the way through. I just put this much tube in and left all the rest of it solid wood.
Yes,
So you
looks
still,
like.
there's give someone like an actual 6 foot long pen.
You easily can. You could, but you don't have to. You can literally just drill the end of a 6 foot long piece of wood and put one tube in the end.
You have a tube in the end of this, right?
Yes, there's a tube glued into that end.
You have this to hold this.
Scott,
Yes.
On your can, you had a piece of copper. Thin piece of copper. How did you do that?
Fit around.
I cut it with scissors, glued it to the end, stuck it together, and then turned it. And I just did that to lessen the friction and to make a little bit of a divider between the two colors. You don't have to have a band between the two halves. If you make them nice and square, you can have it be one nice long piece of wood, but there's always going to be a break you can see. So I like having something in there.
Once in a while, I like different things in the center.
Well, I have thicker copper I can use too, but on this one, I just wanted a really thin piece, but anything you can turn. Same thing. I'd cut it out, glue it, drill it. And then when you put it together, you can turn copper with. Same thing you're doing with the wood, 7mm if you're, yeah. If it's going to be really thick and if it's going to be beyond the tube, it's 7mm. Yeah,
Same size.
yeah. All you're doing is making your own band. That's all you're doing. All right, a couple other things. So on the executive pen, this one, I literally just, you are correct. There we go. I literally, you'll be able to see when I pass it around, but all the cracks in it had a ton of cracks. I just dropped this in epoxy, and that's one of the ones you saw in the epoxy thing. So it just filled all the cracks. I also filled a little bit with copper right there because I had a chip in it. If you make this tube too short, if the blank comes out too short, which I purposely did on this one, I cut an extra 1/4 inch almost off the blank. You can cheat. By sanding that little black thing. You can get it all the way down to about 2mm thick before you ruin it. So I purposely made this pen too short. Now it does mean whoever you give it to has to know that if they ever replace the cartridge, but this one's. So I take copper powder, not the finest grit, but the second finest grit. The finest grit oxidizes and kind of looks pink. You put it in at less than 1/8 of an inch per layer because quick CA can only soak so far before it hardens, and just drip thin CA in. So I'll build up layers at a time, and then it turns just like wood. And even though it shouldn't, it comes out just like a solid piece of copper. So if you look at the pen that's going around now, it looks just like there's a solid piece of copper in it. That's copper powder. And if you really want to do it, like I wanted it to look rustic, so I purposely did it in a bunch of thicknesses of layers so it would end up with holes and kind of stuff, and then polish just the outside. That's all that is copper powder. And if you buy a bag of it off Amazon, it'll probably last you 10 years. I mean, literally, I use like a tiny tongue depressor and drip a tiny bit in. I mean, you're not going to fill huge voids with it, obviously.
Been using it for 10 years and it's still full.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. I don't think there's a story about this pen. This is just an executive pen kit. I was going to donate this one, so I knew there was a reason I had this one. So this is just a piece of walnut, and I mean I turned this in less than 5 minutes. And walnut, if you're using sharp tools, you don't have to sand a whole lot. It's nice.
You do not have a bring back.
I can do a bring back because I've got a kit that's already pre-drilled, pre-squared, pre-everything. If somebody wants to do that as a bring back. This one, when I mixed the epoxy, last time I did it, I made the two purple whoop, there we go. Last time I did it, I made it too purple and it didn't show what I wanted. I forgot how thin I was turning this and I made it too little purple and you can see the tube through it. So not terribly pretty, but it still works. And yeah, this was just the other end of that piece I dropped in the epoxy. I'll let that one go around.
We have
The
one more.
drawbacks of pouring your own epoxy is if you're gonna make it for pin blank, you, either you get it transparent, so you can see the tube, or about, and you end up seeing the tube, or you get it really opaque, you don't see the tube, but
Well, I'm going to show you some pictures in a minute of a couple that we did. And it'll give you an idea what you can do with epoxy. And I used almost crystal clear on it because wasn't gonna be much epoxy left. This pen, I purposely messed up everything on. So I pushed the cartridge in too far so it doesn't retract all the way. I did not go all the way down to the bushing, so I have nasty little edges. I did not use sharp tools. I didn't sand, so it feels like crap. My wife picked it up and literally dropped it because it felt so terrible. I didn't square the end very well, so it's got a chip thing out of it. Yeah, all the way around, this is a terrible pen. Still perfectly functional. So if anybody wants an ugly shop pen that they can blame me, you want it? Or you can take it and fix it. Pass it around first, and yeah, it's all yours. And the great thing about doing that is that took me like 1 minute to make. It's if you don't care what the pen looks like, you can make them real fast. Elvira and I were at Bach Tower Garden, where they have a beautiful gift shop, and the guy's best pens didn't look as good as this. He had a bunch of pens for sale, and they were the worst thing I've ever seen. I'm like, this guy's selling these. It is really easy to grip. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, my first pens were not as bad as.
No, yeah, Elvira's very first pen she ever turned was nowhere near that bad. There was one other thing I had. I am going to give away how many people think they would turn the executive pen kit, the one-piece one I did. Okay, so I have a set of bushings and one kit. And the blank that's passing around, it's long enough you can use it as probably 2 executive pens if you're really careful and get it dead center, or you can use it for a slim line. So I will give away the blank separately because it can be used for either. But this is a set of bushings and the executive pen kit. And this is the easiest kit in the world. No, 3/8. Not exactly 3/8 and 10 millimeter. Not, I would use a 3/8 bit. And it tells in the instructions.
well,
But-
here. We have pin mandrels back there. We have the jig to go, the thing to go on the drill press to line it, and we have a pin assembly thing. What we don't have yet is drill bits. So there might be a 7 millimeter drill bit back there. I won't guarantee it, so we may not have.
And I mean, it'd be pretty cheap to get a set of 7 millimeter bits.
Bring your own drill bits till I find out if the part you gave me enough for us. Or if we're different. You gave me some.
Somebody there got.
That's where.
Wood show down here 4 miles.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All the boxes they're in. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to show a couple other things real quick, and then I'll shut up and see if anybody has any questions. I really like this. It's by Woodpecker Tools. You set it on the end of a blank and mark the center of it. It's really great for pen blanks. So, and it's got a hole, so I hang it right next to the lathe. One of the great things is once you buy a pen mandrel, Penn State wants you to use it. They make an unlimited number of things to turn on a pen mandrel. I have turned perfume atomizers, flashlights. I have a meat shredder kit, letter openers, measuring spoons.
Yeah.
Probably not this one. This one's different.
I didn't know we had those.
So measuring spoons, right, yeah, different shape. Measuring cups, anything with a handle, yeah, straight razor, or not straight razor, safety razors, anything with a handle, they have in there to turn and they'll sell you the bushings for it. I've turned a number of these things. They don't need to be quite as precise as pens. I've turned them without bushings by just using a caliper and getting it close. Again, if I'm only gonna turn one or two. The measuring cups and measuring spoons, I've turned a bunch. Elvira turned them for a whole family. That was one of the very first things she turned after learning to turn a pen. She went crazy. In fact, one of the problems with pen turning is you don't ever want to throw away a piece of wood. She would not let me throw away little pieces of wood. One of her pens that she turned, which is actually a beautiful color because it's full of poison, was the end of the piece of decking I was using, and it's pressure treated. And it was all greenish and bluish and probably is terrible for you, but it looks beautiful. So eventually you'll end up with too many pieces of wood and you'll be drowning in wood.
Then you get into segment and turn.
And then you get into segment and turning.